Welcome back to our last podcast episode for Koe no Katachi. I'm your co-host Patrick Waruntu.
And I'm your other co host, Colin McCutcheon.
Last episode, we talked about the scores surrounding Shoko's attempted suicide. This episode, we are off to another analysis.
Today we will be talking about the final scene and go into detail about the big picture of Kono Katachi.
Through most of the film, Shoya closes himself off from the rest of the world as a result of years of people ignoring him due to his early history of bullying. This is represented with solid blue X's covering almost all of the characters' heads. One thing we did not mention in any previous episode is an important sound associated with Shoya whenever he recognizes another person. That is to say, whenever Shoya is seen as an individual rather than a prior bully by another person, the X's fall off that person as Shoya chooses to interact with him or her.
So during this final scene, Shoya is walking through his school during a school festival, and he's surrounded by people, but he's kind of drowning all of them out. The sound, and he's not looking at any of them. He's kind of looking at the ground, keeping himself isolated as he has done throughout the film. But at this point, he also recognizes, or remembers rather, back during Shoko's suicide attempt, he had promised himself that he would improve and kind of move out of his isolation that he had been showing throughout the film. And to kind of move forward with this idea, he starts to take in the sounds of his surroundings, the noise of the people around him, the chattering, and he also then looks up and there's these X's as we described on everybody's faces, but as he kind of like pushes himself to step out of his usual isolation, all these X's fall to the ground.
Yeah, and during this scene, the soundtrack Lit, or specifically Lit Variation, is playing, and it's the second time Lit is being played, but because the variation is because unlike the last time, Shoya told himself he would change, and so as he uncovers his eyes, he looks up, he looks at everyone, the variation starts to play where the song diverges from the original and you can really feel the emotion of Shoya through it. And it you can kind of compare this to a sermon.
Yeah, and as Oxford Music Dictionary says, to construct a sermon, one was advised to choose a theme, a quotation from scripture, and then illuminate and amplify it in a series of divisions.
Yeah, and in this situation, Kensuke Ushio, the sermon he constructed was lit, and he amplified it into a series of divisions. There's the original one around like in the beginning of the movie when Shoya's just walking on his bike alone.
Yeah, and
there's this
that scene is right after he first visits Shoko, and so it's kind of the beginning of his redemption arc, and this is kind of the variation kind of symbolizes that he's come full circle. And to clarify, the original version that is played has a more somber tone, and the variation is louder and has a heavier instrumentation, with a tone more akin to triumph than sadness. This kind of triumphant alteration to the track is signifying that he's moved from covering his ears to kind of opening himself to the world.
And then as he opens himself to the world, you can really feel the emotion in the variation, and Shoya just starts crying because for the first time in since elementary school, he can finally look at the world for what it is rather than close it off from himself. Each time one of these X's fall, there is a subtle underlying stretch out ring that plays.
This is known as a sonic identity, and BBC News has mentioned that some of our most powerful and emotive memories are triggered by sound. For Shoya specifically, this ring that plays out represents and triggers his theme of acceptance, and that he is accepting someone else into his life and choosing not to remain isolated like he was as a child. This final scene includes a specific ring again when all the X's are removed for good, signifying that he has come to terms with himself and he has completed his arc of personal growth.
Koe no Katachi is a film rooted in redemption and self-realization. And as we have shown, the film score uniquely reflects the nuances of each character's development. This film score is significant because in conjunction with each character, pushes the viewer to reconsider his or her view on the merits of redemption and how one can find meaning in such a turbulent world.
That's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks.